What if I told you your students are sabotaging their own revision without even realising it? Well, today I'm diving into the 9 most common mistakes that students make when they're preparing for exams. And the key thing is, they're mistakes that they don't realise are mistakes. And therefore, if we can explain to them that they're mistakes and how to fix it, it's their ticket to make a huge amount of progress before the exams. Plus, I'm going to be sharing with you a free 1-page handout that you can give to your students based on all of this. And I'll tell you about that at the end of the podcast. Hey there teachers, welcome to Miss Estruch Teach Tell, the podcast where every week I dive into all the tips and tricks that make teaching life so much easier. Whether you're a veteran educator, an early career teacher learning the ropes, or balancing the classroom with being a busy parent, this will help you streamline your workload and bring a bit more balance to your life. You bring the coffee and I'll bring the teach and tell. Hey everyone, and welcome to Miss Estruch Teach Tell, the podcast that helps busy teachers streamline their workload and better help their students. I'm your host, Katie Estruch, here to share strategies, stories, and resources that make teaching more effective and a little less overwhelming. Before we jump into it though, quick catch up. So, quick coffee catch up today. Anyone else suddenly feeling the exam season pressure? My calendar officially has no breathing room at all, and we're only in April. I kind of expect that to happen towards the end of April and May, but it's already full on. But then I guess it's probably my own fault because I'm planning so many things that are trying to support the students, much like I'm sure everyone else is in their school. However, I have been loving the sunshine. Anyway, I hope you've been having a great week, and let's jump into the main content. So today is all about revision strategies and mistakes students might be making in their revision strategy. And as I said, it's focusing on mistakes that they don't realise are mistakes. So it's not going to be things like that they're not revising enough or that they're starting their revision too late, because I think most students are aware that if they don't do well in a test and they've not done enough revision or they cram the night before, they know that's the mistake. So instead, what I'm going to be going through is, from my experience, the 9 most common mistakes I've seen students make that I think are holding them back from progressing, even if they have been revising from an earlier stage and been putting in the hours. And that's why I think it's so important to share this with students, because students are already really motivated, conscientious, and want to do well. If they're making these mistakes, this is going to be such a game changer for their revision and progress. So mistake number 1 that I share with them is revising in chronological order. This is so logical for a student to do, but it's not strategic. Exams don't follow the order of the textbook, and they don't cover literally everything in the textbook and the spec. So instead, I recommend that they should revise based on which topics are harder in general or for them, and which tend to be assessed more often. Those are the ones that I'd be starting with. I still recommend they revise everything, assuming that they haven't left it last minute. But the key thing is, don't start at the beginning, biological molecules, and work your way through, because then you're probably going to end up investing more time in biological molecules, which is normally what students are pretty good at and find easier, whereas they probably find things like homeostasis and gene technologies far more challenging. But if they revise in chronological order, they're leaving that right to the end where they don't have as much time to repeatedly review and practice it. So that's number 1. Start on the hardest topics and the ones that are assessed more frequently. Don't just work through in chronological order. Number 2 is reading over notes and watching videos. Now, I think some students probably are aware that this is a mistake, but they might need reminding. And it's very comforting and easy to read over your notes, read over your textbook, watch a video. And there is a place for that. But if you're literally just sat watching YouTube videos or sat reading your textbook, it is completely passive. And students might think then, oh, but I've watched, like for example, I've got the entire topic videos on my YouTube channel for students, and they might sit there and watch them. And some of those are 1 to 3, I think even 6 hours long for the entire OCR A-level one that I've got. They might sit there and think, I've done some solid revision. I've revised the entire A-level here, but they haven't really. They've just listened to me talk at them. Have they actually taken it in? Do they remember it? Has it stuck in their memory? So there is a place for it, as I said, but if they're going to do that, then they need to be actively reading, actively watching these videos, not just sat there letting it wash over them. So I recommend that they do things like, if they are watching my YouTube videos or anyone else's, then pause, turn it into a flashcard, or maybe pause after you've watched for 10 minutes, blurt down everything you've just heard. Can you remember that information? Then carry on. So they need to be pausing, testing, pausing, creating, doing something so they're not just sat there being talked at, they are having to retrieve and test themselves as they go. Same with if they're reading a textbook, maybe go through a page, cover it, blurt it, can they remember, that sort of thing. Number 3 on the list is only completing exam questions, which on the surface, students often think this is a great strategy, it seems smart. I've been told to be active in my revision, so I'm just going to jump straight into doing loads and loads of questions. But if they haven't actually reviewed the content first or the learning, then this is where they're going wrong. I go through in my YouTube channel that you need to understand, remember, then practice. Those are 3 key elements. And the understanding, hopefully by this time of the year, is pretty good. Maybe it's not, and that's when they could be going over the notes and videos in the active way we talked about. A big chunk of time at the moment is going to be remembering, so that's their active recall, things like flashcards, blurting, testing each other. And then the practicing element is the exam questions. And if they jump straight to exam questions and haven't checked they understand and that they don't remember it yet, then they're not going to do well on those questions. It's a waste of their energy and effort doing it, and it's probably going to demoralize them, and they've wasted some questions that were probably unseen questions that they could have used to really test did they understand and remember at a later date. So obviously doing exam questions is vital, but they must make sure that that's not the only thing they're doing and that they don't jump in straight away doing that. Number 4 is completing all exam questions. And this one shocks students. More isn't always better. And this goes back to the point I made with number 1 about revising in chronological order. You should be focusing on what you find hardest. So I recommend that they should start by, when they're ready to do exam questions, do it by topic or by skill. And that's why on my website I arrange free exam packs by skill or by topic, because I think that's the best starting point, not just jumping into entire past papers at the beginning of your revision. Because I think it's really valuable to be able to save some of those past papers to do in exam conditions or gradually building up to exam conditions. So maybe the first one you're going to do without your notes, but not in time conditions. And then you build it up to without your notes and in time conditions. But you can only really do that properly when they're a bit closer to the exams, when they've learned everything and they're further along in their revision and their recall ability. So I say to them, don't complete or don't aim to complete every exam question. You may well end up doing that because you've put in the hours and you have been able to do that by the end, but that shouldn't be their goal initially, to complete all exam questions. Then there's nothing that can come up that will surprise me. So I do think they should do it by packs based on what they find hardest. And then from Easter onwards, that's when they can start maybe doing 1 past paper a week. And then as they get to May, that is where they can be doing it in full exam conditions. Number 5 is not practicing in timed conditions. Knowing something and writing it under pressure are 2 completely different skills. And if they don't practice with a timer, adding a bit of that artificial pressure, then they might fall apart in the exam. So this is why I recommend that when they're doing the exam question practice, they should build in opportunities that they do either entire papers in timed conditions or even just the packs of questions in timed conditions. So they're going to need that practice to see, are they quick enough at reading, processing the question, recording the facts, and also just writing for 2 hours, which is how long the exams are. So they should be planning in timed questions. And I say to them that for AQA, it's on average 1.3 minutes per mark. So if you're doing a pack of questions, that's 20 marks, times that by 1.3, and that's how long you should be spending on it. Number 6 is not bullet pointing their answers. And for the longer answer questions in particular, this is such a game changer. Planning out their answers with the bullet points helps to structure their thinking and improve their coherence and being concise. So it makes it more focused and it avoids the waffle. I also say to them, let's say it's a 5-mark question. You can make sure you've got at least 5 bullet points, go for 6 as an insurance. So you know you've probably included enough information to answer the full question. It makes it quicker for them to check. It's easier for them to write and for the examiner to mark, so they're less likely to make mistakes. And you can really look for every bullet point, have I got a key marking point? And check with your exam board, but I do know that for AQA, you can bullet point every single answer except the essay. You can even present your answer as a table if you wanted, if it was a comparison question. And for OCR, you can bullet point every single answer. Number 7 is not interleaving their revision. revision. And interleaving means mixing up the topics. So you're not just cramming one topic until you think you've finished it and then you're moving on to the next. That's your block revision. If you're saying, I'm revising biological molecules, I'm revising cells. And what they should be doing instead is maybe revising, let's say one day they're focusing on immunity, the next day they're focusing on meiosis, the next day they're focusing on the sliding filament theory. But then they go back to immunity the next time and they're interleaving and repeatedly revising these topics. And the reason they should do this is it builds better connections between the topics. So therefore it's going to improve their memory retrieval because they've got multiple connections to help trigger that memory, but also it makes their brain more flexible in terms of thinking, so they're going to be better at application questions. And that's actually the main thing that research has shown. Students that follow interleaved revision, they don't necessarily get more marks on every single question, but the noticeable questions that they were better at were application questions. Now, yes, obviously that could just be the type of student that does interleaved revision, might be better at them anyway, but when they did controlled studies of this, they found the group of students who did interleaved were better at application, and it's hypothesized that that's because if you are learning this bit, then this bit, then this bit, then this bit, you can make better connections holistically through the topics. You're better at the application questions. Number 8 is not repeatedly reviewing topics. So they might think, right, I've learned biological molecules now, tick, let's move on to the next thing. And then they might not revisit that at all, or maybe not until they then do past paper questions right at the end. And learning something once is not enough for it to stay in your long-term memory. And you might have listened or watched my podcast last week, which was all about revision based on neuroscience. And I talked about that forgetting curve and spaced repetition. That's what this bullet point links to. So if you're not sure what I mean, you can go listen to that podcast as well. And I go through it in a lot more detail. But essentially, they should be revisiting every bit of topic at least 4 to 5 times. That does include from the first time they learnt it though. And this spaced repetition technique helps to embed that theory in their long-term memory. And as I said last episode, I do have my spaced revision tracker for students, which helps them to track this progress, which if you are interested in, it's on my website, or you can just email me, missestruch@gmail.com. And number 9 is a big one, giving up before they see the improvements. Progress doesn't happen immediately, or at least not for most people. And what can then happen is students might follow all of the strategies that they've been told, and they've changed the way they revise. And changing a habit is more effort. So they're seeing it as, I've done a big change. It was more effort for me to change it. It maybe doesn't feel comfortable the way I'm doing it straight away. And if they then don't see the improvements immediately, they might give up and think, well, I made all these changes. It's had no impact. I'm just going to go back to what felt more comfortable, which was block revising, watching YouTube videos, because that was doing just the same. But the reality is, reminding them, just because you haven't seen the improvement yet, it doesn't mean it's not working. It just takes time for the improvement to kick in and for the progress to happen. So do not give up just before that breakthrough happens, because then it will really have been a waste of time. So that's it, my 9 revision mistakes students make that they might not realise they're making. And my quick win of the week is actually linked to revision lessons that you might be delivering. So if you are going to share this information with students talking about revision, it could lead perfectly into skill-based revision lessons. And that is what I have available for A-level and GCSE biology, a series of skill-based revision lessons with the PowerPoints, activities and guidelines in the PowerPoints ready-made for you. So if you do want to have a ready-to-use series of revision lessons focusing on the skills to boost their grades, then I'll link that in the description below so you can get your hands on that for either A-level, GCSE or both. This week's resource roundup. To make this podcast super actionable for your students and your classroom, I've made a free PDF handout with these 9 mistakes that you give to your students if you're going to be sharing this information to use as you explain it, or if you don't have time in lesson to do it, at least you could still just email it or make it available for them. And within that PDF, I've got the 9 mistakes, why each one is a mistake, and how to fix it. So I'll link that in the description as well. But that is it for today's episode. I hope this gives you some ideas of what you could do to better support all of your students to make sure they can make the maximum amount of progress in the limited time they have left. So hopefully I'll see you next week. You bring the coffee and I'll bring the teach and tell.